This is NEGOTIATEx TV.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on the NEGOTIATEx podcast. We are continuing our conversation with Mark Shapiro, President and CEO of the Toronto Blue Jays. If you haven't already checked out part A of the show, be sure to do that first. Let's jump into the conversation with Mark.
Mark, let me ask a question. I just saw in the news that your manager, John Schneider, I'm curious about his role in what you just described. I just read yesterday that he saved a lady who was choking. So wondering, how does the role of a manager play into what you're talking about?
Well, it's interesting. It's changed a lot, right? I think as we genuinely think about leadership and think about the expectation, there's this mass media perception of leaders, and I think it's one that our culture still tends to be drawn towards. It's thinking that one person's going to make some masterful decision on the way we use the bullpen. One person's going to make some masterful decision on the way our lineup sits. That person's going to give an incredibly motivating speech and everybody's going to automatically just perform better. And I think we really did maybe prescribe to that when I started in this game, that was the role the manager played, some superhuman leader. Now, just like the general manager's role is not really decision maker, it's about leading decision-making process. And the manager's role is about being thoughtful with all the incredible amount of resources we have out there. How can those resources best be facilitated, brought forward, utilized, balanced with the human side, digested by our players in a way that's meaningful, not just checking boxes, but actually meaningfully deployed within a game. So it's an incredibly sophisticated, challenging job that involves so much more balance than it did. It's less about making brilliant decisions and more about helping facilitate and deploy information across a broad group of players and then communicate effectively. Also about prioritizing the problems that come up, because there's going to be any number of problems that exist on a daily basis, and helping work with the others to solve those problems, knowing which ones are important, which ones could undermine our success, and making sure those are the ones we address, not the ones that are just pet peeves. Because there's not enough time to deal with every problem that comes up, regardless of what role that we're in.
I've heard you quote Dr. James Comer a few times. No significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. How does relationship, or the human side, factor into your own personal leadership philosophy and how you collaborate with others on your team?
Well, I think that's at the core of kind of what I was referring a little bit to with manager as well. And I think any leader, including myself, which is always getting back to, it does not matter how much information you have. It does not matter how smart you are. It does not matter how good your process is or system is, that at the core and at the foundation, if you're leading people, you have got to connect first before anything matters, before any of that matters. So while we are obsessively focused to get the best information, to have the best process, to have the best equipment and tools and resources, none of that matters if we're not foundational in the relationship first. And I think, I always go back to, probably now the greatest coach in the history of the NBA, Coach Popovich. And, I've had a chance to be around the Spurs a little bit more through R.C. Buford than him, their team president, who's a friend. And RC, at one point, we were at a leadership conference and talking about, people kept referring to Pop as the greatest NBA coach. And he, RC will always tell me privately, hey, he spends 80% of his time loving and connecting and caring, and only about 20% of his time coaching. And everyone views him as the greatest coach, that he's all about caring and loving and connecting. And so I think that is another way of saying, deep level of empathy, compassion, awareness of who you're trying to lead. And it's got to be authentic. It's got to be consistent. And it's got to be, the precursor to anything else you're trying to accomplish. So when I think about how I want our players to feel, or how I want any person that works here to feel, I want them to feel that caring first, because I know nothing else matters unless we connect first. And that, I think that Dr. Comer quote that my brother, who's committed his life to helping people in the nonprofit world, first brought up to me when we were talking about coaching. Teaching is a lot like coaching. It really is. I mean, the same attributes and characteristics and traits that make elite teachers. And when I think about coaching, I'm often reading education material because it's been a lot more systematically studied than coaching has been studied. So that's how that Comer quote, fits in. That's why it's on the whiteboard in my office. And while some things will get erased and replaced, that one's never going anywhere. It's going to always be up there.
I love the piece around this authenticity and consistency in this. It's so important. Without those, I feel like the relationship with the human side falls flat. So,
yeah, I mean, you're going to be judged by what you do, not what you say, right? And so that consistency is how you carry yourself and the way you demonstrate those values on a daily basis. Parenting's a great reminder for us in that as well. It's funny. I've always reflected back. I had a chance to coach my son growing up, and it's a great laboratory for hey, here you are, this baseball executive that's worked all these years in the game, and all of a sudden you're coaching 11, 12, 13-year-olds, and they're a hard audience. It's hard to win. It's hard to win their respect, but ultimately, what it was a good reminder was they didn't listen to anything I said, but they watched everything I did. So, the way I wanted us to treat umpires, the way I wanted us to treat the teams we competed against, the kind of teammates I wanted them to be, I had to model that before I said it.
We're going to come back to family in just a moment, and we'll kind of expand on that. Want to talk a little bit about just the challenges when the situation is tough. Can you tell us a little bit about how you approach negotiations when teams are involved in trading maybe a really high profile or very popular player? I would assume that involves just a significant amount of internal churn and discussions, as well as the obvious kind of external negotiation.
In those circumstances, like any other negotiation, you're trying to regress out emotion and momentum, from the decision. And probably the challenge that in sports is most challenging about negotiations, whether it's a trade or a free agent, is that you receive a lot of free advice. Anybody else, you could be a Fortune 500 CEO leading a decision-making process that's far greater than any negotiation I've ever been a part of from a pure monetary level. But the reality is they're going to walk into the barber shop and the barber's not going to ask them about an acquisition of a company, right? You can walk in to get a cup of coffee and no one at the coffee shop's going to say, you shouldn't think about that merger, that merger or acquisition. But our jobs, everywhere you go, whether you're picking your kids up at school, getting your hair cut, grabbing a coffee or going out to dinner, someone's going to step up and give you some free advice. Or you're going to just, you're going to open up your browser in the morning and there's going to be 6 articles that are, in your face, or, get in your car and turn on the radio and they're going to be talking about. So, that the process and the framework for the negotiation is essential because it removes that bias. It removes that emotion and that momentum that can undermine either how you feel about a player or how you feel about wanting to satisfy the people that gave you the free advice. And that's why a framework and a process and a system for negotiating is so important.
Well, and it's got to be difficult because the folks giving the free advice, they're a key stakeholder group, right? I mean, they're oftentimes your fan base. So I would think there's a tension of being aware of and still making decisions that are wise for your organization.
And the heart of that tension in sport lies on the majority of your stakeholders have both eyes absolutely firmly in this moment. They are only thinking about what is beneficial today. And our jobs are to have one eye on this moment and one eye on the future. We've got to balance those things. We're trying to build a sustainable championship team, not just a championship team, which means we want to have a chance to win every year. That's a balance. there are times we will weight the current moment more than the future, and times we'll weight the future more than the current moment. But anytime we are not 100% weighting the current moment, we are in conflict with our stakeholders, and that creates a tension that we have to overcome in a negotiation. So by the way, our stakeholders can be the team, the players, the coaches, the front office people around us sometimes, as well as our fans. It's just that as in leadership positions, we can not only make decisions in a vacuum based on only on this current moment.
Talking about other stakeholders, we'll maybe explore this a little bit. Recently your team received the Commissioner's Award for Philanthropic Excellence. Congratulations on that. I'd imagine that as president and CEO of a Major League Baseball team, regardless of where you are, you have significant communication with city, community leaders, opportunities to collaborate around or discuss things such as stadium renovations, even more recently, COVID protocols and so forth. How do you approach those conversations with that stakeholder group? And do they differ at all in an environment like Toronto, where you're the only baseball team in Canada, versus maybe a city like Cleveland?
Well, I had far more conversations than I ever dreamed I would have with the Canadian government at every level, city, provincial, and federal during COVID. And they were, I gained a very deep and quick education of the Canadian system of government, which is different. It's a parliamentary system. It's different than the US system of government. So I got a quick education, because I had to interact and intersect with so many different stakeholders. And yes, whether it was in Cleveland dealing with funding for a renovation of Progressive Field, or whether, it was trying to just get back in the country to play games in Canada and in Toronto, because we actually ended up having to play games in both Dunedin, Florida, and Buffalo, New York, which is major league games, regular season games, which is beyond belief. We were the only team that not only couldn't play in our own stadium, we couldn't play in our home country or city, which is, could be a whole other podcast. It's just a heck of an experience. I think in the end, though, what I have thought about when dealing with those government officials is trying to understand what's important to them, what's at the core of of what they need to be, of what will drive their decisions, and trying to help satisfy those things and still accomplish what we want to accomplish. So, and that's challenging with politics, right? And it probably is a little bit more challenging than almost anything else with my personality, because I don't tend to be a political or bureaucratic being. Those things those are some of my lack of patience with those things are probably a weakness of mine. They're a limitation of mine. And so when it comes down to someone thinking more about, favorable ratings and putting their finger to the political winds and making a decision, and I'm thinking about what logically makes sense, those things are discordant to some extent at some times. And those were challenging moments for me. That's where I've got to rely on better people around me that kind of pull me back in and are more patient. And I've got to make sure that we're persistent and aware that, those are legitimate concerns for the politicians and for the people, leading government. It's not just, the general well-being of the community that they have at heart.
You also mentioned engaging with team owners. We often hear from listeners about how difficult it can be to influence or persuade upwards. What advice do you have for effectively leading our bosses?
Manage expectations. That would be the first thing I'd say. When I reflect back and when I've talked with my friends in other sports, it is a unique beast, a major league sports owner. They don't often approach sports the way they approach their other businesses. And they are impacted emotionally by their friends, that they see out, because they can more publicly gauge short-term success and failure, through the lens of wins and losses. So it is extremely important before, during, and after the season that there is a very clear strategy articulated, that there is an objective set of expectations that are set, but there are a range of outcomes that are discussed, because there is a variability that comes with human beings that cannot be perfectly, articulated. And so I think what I always want to do with stakeholders up is have them understand this is the process we went through to make the decisions we made. Here's our strategy. Here's how we executed on it. Here's what our expectations are going in. However, that there are a range of outcomes that, could happen this year. But regardless of what occurs, you need to understand how we got here. And if you buy in to how we got here, if we're aligned that the process was good, that the system was good, that the inputs were good, the variables, the people, the contributions, all those variable inputs were good, then over the continuum, we're going to have good outcomes. Don't be swayed by any individual outcome. And I think that's what you're trying to do, is ensure that doesn't mean we're going to not be bitter at a loss, doesn't mean we're all not going to be disappointed, but that we don't deviate from a strategy or plan just based on any individual data point. And that can happen with an owner in sports, where it might not happen with the owner in their other businesses, because there's an emotional piece to it.
You may have just touched on this, and so I'll ask, looking ahead to the season and what is always a highly competitive American League East Division, how do you get the team ready to thrive for 162 games?
I mean, there are different times and different cycles, and our expectations are championship expectations. To me, the best way to have us prepare for that is to not focus on the outcomes, but to focus on us continually improving, to focus on us and our players articulating to each other their identity, how they're going to hold each other accountable, how they can advance their brotherhood, further than it is right now, before they start to enter into games that count, before we step foot, into the arena where we are competing day in and day out, because it is much more challenging to do that on the fly. It's easier to make those adjustments and to recalibrate. But if you're having to create that while you're competing, that is really challenging. So I'd say, as we are beginning to undertake the journey, it's recommitting, rearticulating, ensuring that there's alignment to what our identity is, to what forges, the bonds of brotherhood that exist in that clubhouse downstairs. And we're talking about how we're going to hold each other accountable throughout 162 data points in games. But we're also, committing to each other that we're going to stay steadfast in that journey, regardless of where it goes.
Mark, shifting a little bit off the team, maybe to even kind of big picture of the work you do within Major League Baseball. And we mentioned a number of the committees that you sit on and participate in, league meetings just wrapping up recently. As you work on these committees that affect the entire sport and all 30 major league teams, how do you manage the tremendous differences between regions, team owners, and so forth to get alignment and actually get things accomplished?
That is a great question. Often not well. Often not well, because we're all competitive and we all tend to look at life through our own circumstances. And in baseball, more than any other sport, because of the way the collective bargaining agreement is set, because of the way we share revenue, the disparate views of our businesses, and they are 30 different unique businesses, often make it difficult to align. For me, what I do is, I kind of look at it like I've got two hats. And when I go to those meetings and we're working on the future of the game, my hat is less a Toronto Blue Jay, a Cleveland Guardian, whatever it is. My hat is just, it's a Major League Baseball hat. It's just the game of baseball. It's just thinking about how much I love the game and how much I want that game to be greater, 5-10 years from now than it is today, and even when I'm done working in it. And I think if for all of us that sit on those committees, the more we can step outside of the myopic view of the moment, of our own particular set of experiences and circumstances. Not meaning we don't bring our circumstances with us, but meaning we put those circumstances aside and we think about, we are here to make the game better. We are here to grow the game. We are here to help others enjoy it as much as we do and be impacted by it as much as we have been impacted by it. So I guess that's when I put my kind of universal MLB hat on, my universal baseball hat on, and just think about, what can we do to grow the game? What can we do to make the game better? What can we do to help more people enjoy it? And that's, I try to put aside my own circumstances, my own self-interest, and just make my self-interest the game of baseball. I think that's what we all try to do.
Yeah. And again, I just imagine that's difficult at times. A year ago, Major League Baseball experienced a lockout that lasted a little over 3 months. Unfortunately, it had very little impact, negative impact on the season. As you look back on that, any negotiation lessons that you think were learned from that lockout? And if put your predictor hat on, any chances we experience a lockout or strike again in the future?
Well, I mean, I think the the underlying feeling I've got when I think about the lockout in general, and just maybe the stoppage, that labor created, and obviously I've seen a few of those over a 31-year career, and whether it's 1994 players walking out, or whether it's, a lockout, it is that without trust, without truly trying to understand the other party's priorities, you continually battle and continually end up at negotiations that both groups end up losing. No one really ends up winning. You can feel like you've got concessions, but the damage inflicted is probably more damaging in the long run. And my overall opinion, and this is just personal, is until we end up and can create a system or a dynamic or a relationship where our players truly feel like they're stakeholders and not employees, it's going to be very difficult to have a different negotiating dynamic for us, regardless of the labor cycle that we're in. And I'm not unique in feeling that way. I think the bulk of owners feel we just haven't been able to do that. We have not been able to pierce that dynamic. It's, unfortunately, and you can look at the history of Major League Baseball labor relations, and it is like any historical, deep-seated, challenging dynamic. It's just, there is a different view, different perspective, and a lack of trust that is historically based, and we have not been able to bridge that trust gap.
So Mark, kind of discussing the getting creative around all the different stakeholders, the different owners, alignment with the players, how does that creativity show up, and how do you really foster that as a leadership skill?
It's funny, I've had artists in my life that have, been played important roles. And, I think people may not look at executives and leaders through a creative lens very often. I think the way that I've thought about an organization being a special place to work and play, that general underlying feeling that I want this to be the best place to work and the best place to play, that there's a creative side to that. It's not static. It's not, not just about individual decisions. It's about thinking how things and people link together and how they connect to each other. And maybe the creative piece of that is, it's the way you think about the connection of individual efforts from one to the next. And over a continuum, those things are able to build something special and beautiful and lasting and impactful upon the people who just watch us play. So that when the team takes the field, that team doesn't just exemplify a win or loss, but that team, the way they play the game, manifests the values that link a scout to a coach, to a trainer, to a strength coach, to a physical therapist, and something in the way those players play the game is a representation of values.
Mark, there was a quote I read as we were preparing. You said, Corey, your personal philosophy is never to let your job define your worth as a human being. I think that's difficult for many of us, regardless of profession, given the demands of your job that you've been describing. How do you try to manage the negotiations in both your personal and professional pursuits?
Well, that is extremely challenging, but absolutely important to any sustainability. You will not be sustainable in any career in life if you cannot separate your self-esteem and self-worth from your outcomes, from your performance. And so I think ultimately it gets back to the relation component that I don't look at myself as being a different person when I think about myself as a leader. The leader I am is the man I am, is the father I am, is the partner I am, is the brother I am, is the son I am, all those things. And it gets back to, again, I know I tend to be a little redundant when talking about these core values, but you've got to be consistent. And when you walk in the door, you're not putting on some cape that says, okay, I'm going to lead some negotiation process now and transition and transform into a superhuman negotiator, a superhuman leader, and that makes incredible decisions. And no, I'm just the same person that, walked from taking out the trash and washing dishes and, feeding the cat and walking the dog. And that same person is going to, come here and lead people through a decision-making process, that lead people through a negotiation, not conduct a negotiation, but lead a negotiation process. That's going to involve input from a lot of people. That's going to help us, achieve a better outcome. And so I think that humility, that open-mindedness being at the core, that curiosity, that quest for improvement and growth, and learning and development is really got to be at the core. And that reminder that, regardless of what the outcomes are and people singing your praises, you're no different from that person who woke up in bed in the morning, no different from everybody else that works here. And on the darkest days when, people are angry and calling for your job and, insulting you in ways that, probably you don't deserve to be insulted. That's just their passion playing out, but you're no different. You're still the same person that is important to a lot of other people in life, and you've got to think about that. So you don't have the luxury of riding that roller coaster, and if you do hop on that roller coaster where the outcomes are defining how good you're feeling about yourself, you're going to have a short-lived existence. You're going to make other people around you miserable, and you're not going to make it. It's not going to be the best place to work or the best place to play.
Building off of this, as you look back on a career of 30 years, is there a particular moment or event that you're most proud of? And we're blending leadership and negotiation here quite a bit in this conversation. I see the two as linked, but whether it's a negotiation or we were working through a real difficult problem that you look back and you said, we were really successful. And if you pulled it apart, why was it so successful?
People love to ask about moments and, are there favorite memories? And, I think, I always do feel like the best ones are yet to come, and there's been some ones certainly in Toronto. But when I was a GM and went through the unbelievable challenges of kind of turning over the entire team and going from what was a perennial champion for 8 straight years to worst and get back to championship level again. And when we knocked the Yankees out of the playoffs, clinched the division, led the league in wins in 2007, the moment that our players were celebrating in the locker room in 2007, I remember looking around and all the years we had talked about values-based decision-making and picking players that, we believed in, not just from a talent perspective, but also as human beings, and building something special, and the linkage that those values represented between the scouts that work to identify these players, the women and men sitting in cubicles that, were crunching analytics and data that contribute to us acquiring those players, to the trainers and the physios that rehabilitated the ones that were hurt, to the, to all the people in the office that help put together, the games that maximize revenue, that allow us to pay those players and keep them together, and all the people that felt a part of what happened, that the celebration that those players had was really the manifestation of those values and of the link, of a group of people who bought into something that was, we are going to put a team out in the field that represents the values that join us together. And the way they play the game is going to be something that when we lay our heads in the pillow tonight, we're going to believe in those players, in Grady Sizemore and CeCe Sabathia and Victor Martinez and Johnny Peralta and Travis Hafner, and those players are going to be, and to this day, man, those are, I look at those guys and think that's what you want. You want to know that through ups and downs, injuries, performance swings, they care. They care that they care about each other, and they care about, wanting to do something great. And those guys did great things, but they were great people too, and great teammates. So great moment for me, just thinking about what that meant to so many people, not just the fans, or not just those players pouring champagne, but all the people behind the thousands of efforts that led us to that moment.
Mark, this has been a wonderful conversation. As we prepare to wrap up, any final thoughts for our listeners on how they might become more effective negotiators or leaders?
Yeah, I know like Aram said, we spent a lot of time, Nolan, on leadership, but I do think that we could have dovetailed back and forth from leadership to negotiation, and thinking about the only things that we didn't talk about in negotiation are just the importance of really understanding alternatives of both yourself and, the people you're negotiating against. I think if someone were to say, is there one thing, that's going to define the success, of a negotiation, it's going to be absolutely understanding alternatives and framing a walkaway, and being disciplined enough to stick to that. And to frame that walkaway, you've got to truly understand your own alternatives and the alternatives of the people across the table from you. To do that, to truly understand and to conduct, once you have that, to conduct a negotiation that is meaningful and doesn't do harm to either person, and you can build a business and a life upon, you've got to be values-based, and you've got to connect and care first. And that's where the leadership piece fits in. And that's the common theme to a lot of what we talked about today. So I enjoyed the conversation, appreciated the opportunity, certainly appreciated the thoughtfulness of the questions that both of you had. It's not often that I get, I can spend an hour and, 10 minutes and have that go by so quickly, but I'm passionate about the topics that we covered today, and appreciate you guys giving me the chance to kind of reflect a little bit and talk about some meaningful topics to me.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Aram for closing thoughts.
Yeah, I'll just, Mark, I'm going to echo our thanks to you and say thank you for the thoughtful responses. Know you're incredibly busy, but so thank you for making the time to be on and talk to us. So much we could talk through around the alignment of values, who you work for. I loved and I really hope folks will go back and listen to the idea of how you describe leading upwards. No surprises, align with them and pull them in, our bosses and our superiors, pull them into the process by which we make decisions, to include what you said at the end, which is understanding that we negotiate, we lead to make better decisions, right? And that means knowing what we can walk away to, and comparing that to what we're doing at the table. And that is an important driver for why we negotiate in the first place, and certainly doing that as it ties to relationship and good communication and the values piece. So thanks for everything. This has been great. And again, I just Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Have a great day.
That is it for us on the NEGOTIATEx podcast. If you please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, we'll check you out in the next episode. Hey, thanks for checking out this video on NEGOTIATEx TV. If you found any value at all, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification icon if you want to be notified of future videos. And then we also have a couple videos over here that you might be interested in checking out. If you and your small business, your team are looking to get negotiations or leadership training, then you can head over to NEGOTIATEx.com and learn more about the coaching services we offer. Thanks, and I'll see you over in the next video.